Okay, good afternoon, everyone. It is now 1 o'clock, and it is time to start the sixth and final Responsible Travel Tourism Forum webinar for 2013. I'm your host, Andrea Dixon. Welcome, everyone, to our Responsible Travel and Tourism community. Joining us for the first time, RTTF is a forum designed to educate and promote tourism learning. If you're a regular participant, you will know that nominated RTTF Leadership Awards are open until December 6th. Anyone can submit a nomination and there is no cost. RTTF will be giving out 3 awards in 3 categories. The RTTF Leadership Award recognizes tour operators, accommodations, and destinations. The second category is an award for a travel agent or travel agencies. And the final category is a Student Leadership Award. Please submit your nomination today at rttf.ca and choose the Leadership Awards tab on the website to start the nomination process. The RTTF Leadership Awards and our webinars exist because of support from our sponsors. Our sponsors are Eton Chelsea, Air Canada, the Ted Rogers School of Management at Ryerson University, and Baxter Travel Media. Today is our last webinar. We will be discussing issues around travel and travelers' mobility. But all the previous webinars that you see on your screen are archived and ready for listening at rttf.ca. I encourage you to go back and listen to them at any time. Today we have 2 presentations that are jam-packed with useful information and suggestions for you to successfully learn or improve how you serve your clients with mobility issues. I am deliberately attempting to keep my introduction short because I know how much content our speakers have to share, and I don't want to waste a second. Our first speaker is Dr. Ted Manning. He is joining us today from Ottawa. Dr. Manning is president of Tourist Inc., an international consulting firm based in Ottawa that provides integrated planning for tourism destinations, develops measures of sustainability, and provides environmental management solutions worldwide. He has worked in more than 50 countries, and if you find a sustainable tourism project that has been completed anywhere in the world, it is very likely you can trace a part of it or all of it back to Dr. Manning in some way. Our second speaker is Isabelle Ducharme. She's calling us from Montreal, and she has been working on social integration of people with disabilities for more than 20 years. During the last 10 years, she's presented at conferences, facilitated multiple workshops on creating awareness for integrating people with disabilities, and she is also the chairperson of the board at Carole, a Quebec-based organization whose mission it is to make tourism and culture more accessible for persons with limited physical abilities. And they have some great resources that Isabelle is going to share with us today. For about 20-25 minutes, and our Q&A, or questions and answer session, will follow both speakers. And please ask lots of questions at any time. You can communicate your questions by typing them into the chat box. You can add who they're for. That makes it easier for me to compile the questions. But you can type questions at any time during the webinar. You do not have to wait until the end of the webinar. Ted, that is all I need to cover, so I'm going to pass the mic over to you.
Hi there. I'm Ted Manning, and they're about to put my slides on, and hopefully you can all see them. We got interested in disabled travel or challenge travel at Machu Picchu. We were there and saw people crying in the parking lot. They were standing approximately a half a kilometer from the entry. And what they hadn't realized when they got there, that just a couple of 100 meters from where they were, just down the stairs, through the door on the wall, is one of the most wondrous places on earth. And they couldn't get there. It's a serious issue when people do not understand the barriers that face them and get places where they are not able to get there and not able to participate. What I want to cover today is some of the key issues of accessibility for travelers, why access is important, some of the common issues and cases, and end with a proposal for a new global information system that lets everybody understand that, for example, here in Peyto Lake, they have a long, steep ramp down. Yes, they can get there in a wheelchair or a walker, but it's not easy. And they need to know that in advance and know if it, in fact, is suitable for them. The key issues facing the challenged traveler is that there really is no central clearinghouse globally for information on access. Not only that, but it's often not defined carefully. More than 20% of travelers have some issues regarding access, whether it's just a bum knee this week or whether they're permanently handicapped in some fashion. And yet the classification systems are based on assumptions regarding the capability or limitations of a very typical traveler. And not only that, but good classification systems are only available in a few developed countries. And in fact, you'll be talking about one of them a little later in this presentation. The issues of access tend to be unique to every place and also unique to every individual. And accessibility is not just important to someone who is disabled, visibly disabled, but many have temporary or permanent disabilities. They're overweight, they have injuries, they're carrying young children, they're hauling large luggage. Any of this means that the simplest barrier, a curb, some steps, some rough pavement can be a barrier for them. Try and find your way to the washroom here if you have a bad knee, or if you're in a wheelchair, or if you need a walker. It's 27 steps down and around a corner through a rough path. And this is very common in tourism sites worldwide. Now, why should the tourism industry care? Well, to begin with, as people age, it is becoming a growing market segment. And all of these people are increasingly active and internet savvy and are prepared to seek the places that are suitable for them. Clients increasingly see access as a basic human right. And as a result, many countries are beginning to take access seriously and are ready to start providing information. And many particular destinations do so simply because they find it's a very important part of their marketing. It also is increasingly a factor in certification of enterprises and destinations. We've just finished some work for the Global Sustainable Sustainable Travel Council, and the elements of accessibility and information on accessibility are part of that certification process. Also, the question for those of you who are selling to clients is, do you want to get your clients into a situation where they can't get back? It's enough perhaps to tell them that they can't go past this point in the road. That's my wife on her way to visit Volcanoes National Park, and there's no way she's going to get across that lava flow. But she knew that in advance. Other people arriving there don't. So some of the key things about accessibility that we need to take into consideration are that every traveler is unique and has his or her own capabilities and constraints. Are these stairs in St. Martin a barrier? Well, only if you can't climb stairs. But if you can climb stairs and you have somebody to lift a wheelchair or you're able to walk a short distance, they're not. The same thing as access to a cruise ship. Access to the large ship on the right is very simple. It's a level platform and there are sailors there to help you. Access up this ramp is not for many, many people. And we also can't assume that everyone is the same. Even a wheelchair comes in many different forms. Some can be easily folded and lifted upstairs. Others are heavy and cannot get over even the simplest curb. So some common issues regarding accessibility and why even the information you can get is sometimes not correct is that the room may be accessible, says so on the web page, but the hotel is not, because there is just no access that doesn't involve stairs. But if you can walk up the stairs, the elevator is accessible. Often the hotel is accessible, but the restaurant, or in one case in Acapulco, the check-in area is not. And you can't get to there unless you have someone else with you to go up. The elevator may be out of service. Often, in Europe in particular, any access points are blocked by parked vehicles. Or in the case of this example in Piraeus, Greece, somebody's put a sign in the middle of the accessible pathway. Now, again, if you have a foldable wheelchair or if you can get up and walk around it, it's maybe not that bad a barrier. But for someone who cannot, it is not possible to get past. Same thing with what paths or walkways are covered in. If it's muddy, it may not be possible to get across it. Even people who have walking difficulties will find that rough gravel or cobblestones can be a serious barrier. So the main things to consider with your clients or yourself are distance, how far can they walk, stairs, how many stairs can they do it with or without help, can they do it with or without a railing, ramping, are ramps in place, what are the conditions of a path. The example of this eco-lodge in the Gambia is that for most people, particularly if they have a walker or a light wheelchair, this is accessible, easy for someone to help them up that. But if they have a heavy wheelchair, that could be a significant barrier. The other issue is that key points is their help. And I'll give you a couple of examples later on that can be instructive in terms of what you have to ask about. Physical capability, can they walk any distance? Can they transfer to a car seat, to a bus, to a boat? Does the traveler have a companion or companions with them who can help them upstairs? Or can they carry the vehicle up while they make it up a short distance on their own? And what's their endurance level? And often in places are assists available on site. Here is Labadee, Haiti, where they have sand wheelchairs, which will allow anyone who arrives there and can transfer into the chair to be taken down to the water, to be taken all over the site, and there's help available. And Lanzarote, Canary Islands, you can get on the camel, and those camel rides are just as accessible to anyone. However, if you have an exceptionally heavy traveler, that may not be suitable. And the same thing is true in Kusadasi, Turkey here, where we have bicycle carts. If the person is able to get into that, they can have the same experience that every other traveler does. My wife got stranded on a tour in St. Lucia because it got too rough. She's actually in this boat being lifted back up into the Noordam. And they were able to get her onto it, but not off because it was too rough, so they lifted her up to the main level. And again, these aids are available, but not always, and sometimes you have to book things in advance. Okay, a couple of examples now. Santorini, famous crater in Greece, cliff-top villages. Cruise ships have to tender. Most streets are cobbled, cable car up. The big challenge here is, can I see Santorini? The answer is probably yes, but only if there's sufficient planning and information in advance. Accessibility depends on whether they can travel, can transfer with help to a bus or boat. If they have to stay in a motorized wheelchair, it is not accessible. But if they can get onto the chairlift and can get a wheelchair or a walker or a cane through a fairly rough access point, it is all accessible. And here we are. There is one way you can go up on burros. That's not recommended for anybody, even the fit. But they do have lifts that take you down to the cable car. They have fairly flat access points to the top. That information is only available with difficulty. And one of the challenges we're looking at is to try and get enough information in advance so that it's provided and people can make up their own mind. And Santorini, for those who cannot do that, can still get nice crater views as shown in the top. But if they can get onto a bus from the ship, they are able to see the rest of this. This is a winery above it. This is the beautiful place called Oya, which is probably the most picturesque. It's on all of the Greek posters. Venice, another one, just to give it an example. Is it accessible? And people say, well, all those waterways. Well, for most people, it is quite accessible because Venice is a destination that has gone all out to try and attract accessible travel, made a lot of changes when they held the disabled games, the Paralympic Games for Europe there a few years back. So much of Venice is accessible. And in fact, they provide maps of the accessible routes. Each of these districts is shown. This is available from the Venice website. and right down to individual streets, bridges, and points of boarding boats. And they have a fully accessible transport system with a few exceptions. And again, we have to take these into mind. The main transport through Venice is boats, and if you can go level from one to another, they're quite accessible. It means that people using canes, people using walkers, people who use non-motorized wheelchairs will not have much problems. And the people who help them go from this level point to this level point on the ship, they seldom have more than about 6 inches, at most a foot, and the people will be able to help them. On the other hand, people who use motorized wheelchairs, particularly the larger ones, will not be able to avail themselves of that access. Throughout Venice, many key bridges are ramped and lifts are provided on others. So again, how do we find out about this in advance? The answer is that many destinations are now providing good information, although even where they are, accessible areas may be blocked at high tide. Hotel access may be difficult simply because of the high tides. And here, you really can't get through there. You have to go and walk on the platforms that have been put up for people who are not disabled, and can be quite a challenge during the high tide periods, particularly in spring and fall, for visitors to Venice. Is this available on their website? The answer is yes, the probability of high tides is in fact made available. Another common question is, can I use a non-accessible room in a hotel or a cruise ship? Most rooms designated accessible are generally designed for a typical wheelchair, probably one 25, 26 inches wide. There's no global standard for that. There's no global standard for support bars, toilets, length of reach people have to have. However, if a traveler does not need to use a shower and if their chair fits through the door, a normal room can be sufficient. But suitability depends on a lot of things. And therefore, the traveler themselves is the one who knows what is accessible to them. And so if you're booking through a cruise company or through the hotel, you may in fact have to call and ask. And you have to ask specifics. How wide are the doors? How steep are the ramps? If you are not able to get that, then it is probably useful to begin to call for people who, for hotels that do provide that information. And in a minute, I'll show you a few that provide it on their websites. Another example, can I visit the Long Tent rice terraces? Now, these are very steep terraces. They're very beautiful. And you would think that they would be inaccessible. But the answer is they're not. And that's because there are services available locally to take people up and through. And whether they're handicapped or not, these services are available for a price. And they can get to almost all of the site with very little limitation. Again, a key one may be weight, because for very hefty travelers, that may not be available for them. And the one that we think is probably a model for everywhere is Craters of the Moon National Park in Idaho. One of the examples of how people can really provide good information up front. So you can, if you can get there by bus or car, you ask yourselves, well, is it suitable for me? And the answer is visible right there at every trailhead, so that it tells you how wide, how steep, whether there's rough surfaces, how far up and down you go, and it's up to you to decide your own capabilities and limitations on that day with the help you have or do not have. And this means very few people even start trails that they are not likely to be able to finish. It's a very good example, and one that actually is the basis for what we're going to talk about in a minute. Other ones are much more difficult. Common question is, how can I get to the beach in Cancun or any other location? And the answer is not easy to find. There are many websites with good anecdotal information. And in fact, if you just Google something using the words wheelchair beach access Cancun or wherever, at least a dozen sites come up, and some have testimonials. But right now, there's no systematic means to obtain that information. Some popular destinations are developing good websites, but they're hard to find. So the wheelchair symbol is a good indication that at least some effort has been made to make it accessible for some people. Unobstructed access, elevators to help lift. But again, very few international standards. Several countries have their own. Several organizations, and you'll hear about a couple later today, do have very good certification systems that help a lot more. So in advance, knowledge is really power. You know, what we're looking at is how you get basic information in place on accessibility conditions for travelers. So we are proposing at this point a basic set based on the kinds of indicators that we are now using for sustainability for destinations to provide simple information on access conditions, steps, distances, widths, or barriers for each site. We've done tests on a number of sites. Jasper, Alberta Tram is one of the first test sites. The idea is to get some basic information in place so that you can simply hit a logo on a website and there it is. And there'll be basic things saying, and say in this case of a small grass hut in the Gambia, how many steps, is there space inside, does it have, how steep, how far, how wide, how far from where a vehicle can get, for a restaurant, basic information. There are some excellent sites that are doing this now, although it's not formalized. But the templates can apply to, say, a bus or to a tour. The idea being that the templates are fairly simple, add more certifications if they have them. The marketplace will, over time, favor those who provide the information because you can learn in advance. And we're still exploring the idea of crowdsourcing for validation like TripAdvisor. So the next steps, we've received a lot of good moral support from organizations to try and make it happen. And ideally, the use of the program will be adopted by one or more of the major suppliers of electronic bookings, either to the public or to agents. It's very analogous to the Sustainable Destination criteria from the Global Sustainable Tourism Council. And we're hoping in the next year or so to get a participatory approach in effect to get something going more broadly and get sponsorship so that it is linked. The problem is, how do you get the major websites to use accessibility as a search criterion, because very few do. How to get suppliers to list access conditions to gain market share. How to get basic standards for good when they thought that there were accessible facilities in place. I won't go through these in any detail. I'll just mention a few that are important in getting good information on accessible sites. Kerul will be telling you exactly how they're doing it, and they're one of the models. PlanApp, through the Canson Foundation, has a website, and it's definitely worth looking at. Travel has accessible hotels by destinations worldwide, and Ability Trip has very similar. And Wheel Traveling, and these are will be made available to you at the end of the seminar. Similarly, TripAdvisor now has the ability to choose under amenities wheelchair access in its search options. Most of the other sites do not. It's a little hard to find, but it's now there. The real model, Scandic Hotels, because on its own website in its special needs section, has detailed information on access conditions for its hotels. And not just saying it's wheelchair accessible, it tells you how wide, how high, whether it has bars, how high the beds are, how much space between the beds, how far it is, and how big the ramps are, and so forth. All the basic information that allows people to decide for themselves. We've just been looking as well at some of the other chains that do have accessible rooms available, but most of the searches will involve you going in and actually choosing to buy before you can then see if it has suitable rooms. One of the best sources is the LinkedIn group called Accessible Travel for Persons with Disabilities. And it is a real resource because people who are trying to serve a disabled client can go right on and put a request on and say, we are looking for good access to certain places, certain destinations, certain transport. You can ask the question, is the lift up to the top of Jasper and accessible for someone who has a heavy wheelchair? And the answer will, in fact, normally come back within a few days. It's not yet systematic, but it's an excellent source of anecdotal information and support where people who do have challenges help each other. So to end this, I'm going to say, so can I visit Machu Picchu? That was where we started. And the answer is, it is now possible. There was enough pressure brought on the people managing the site to say that they had to make provision for challenged travelers to go and use the site. They have now got a system where porters can be hired to carry wheelchairs through the site, parts of the site. But it is still a complex thing that an agent or an individual must plan in advance, and they must obtain permission to go to those particular parts of the site. And we still have a balanced issue of, is it, which is more important, to preserve the integrity of the site and stop potential damage, or to allow everyone a greater degree of access? And that is a significant challenge. So I'm going to end there and turn it over now to my colleague, Isabelle Ducharme, who's going to tell you about a very important and significant Canadian initiative.
Actually, first, I think I'm going to jump in, Ted, if you don't mind. And I want to say, or Isabelle too, I just want to say thank you, Ted. Your presentation really helped us look at the fundamental question of can I go, which, seems so simple, a yes or no. But, of course, once you know more about the challenges in the accessibility sector, you realize it's the first of many questions. And thank you for your pictures and the case studies. I think they really drove home the issues that face people in this market if, we haven't been exposed to it. And that, there's many definitions of what accessibility is, and it's going to mean different things to different people in different situations. And you have to use answered lots and lots of questions, and it takes time. So this is why I think it's a really great market for travel agents, because it is a lot of work. And if you build up your expertise in it, you're going to have a great, I think, growth coming up. And I know the future is really exciting for this market. I really love the global information system that hopefully will be in place in the future. I can just imagine how much work it's going to be on everyone's part, but it'd be lovely to have. So I think now it is time to welcome Isabelle. I know your presentation is going to build upon Ted, so I'm going to turn it right back over to you, Isabelle. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Just before I start, I just want to jump on something, or just something that Ted was saying, and it is true that the person that has the limitations knows best what they need, but also keep in mind that that person, it might be their first travel, especially if it's after an illness or an accident or any new situation in their life. So you also have to make sure when you have a new client that wants to travel and has limitations, to verify with them if it is their first travel, because then you might just be, they might just be as new as this as you would be. I am not seeing my PowerPoint coming on.
On my screen, it's up, Isabelle. So the first page is up.
I'm trying to refresh it, and it's, oh no. Okay, I have it. Thank you. Sorry. So just as an introduction, I want to mention that, yes, I am here representing CARIROL, and I will be talking about what CARIROL does and and how we can help when you want to travel, when you want to plan a trip for somebody that has a disability. But I also want to mention that I am a person with a disability. I travel with a motorized wheelchair, so I know exactly the issues that Ted mentioned before. I have traveled before my accident. I have traveled to through the country and the States and Europe. And since my accident, I've traveled to sun destinations and Australia and China. And it is true that sometimes it is obviously accessible and it's very easy to get to, and sometimes it's a bit hidden, so you have to look a bit further for the information. So for my presentation, you have the content. It will be generally what who what Kerol does and how it can help. After that, I'll just do a little bit of statistics with the study that we made. We've done a few studies in the past 30 years that the same issues seem to be coming up, but now that we know them, and there are more and more people interested in caring for people with disabilities, it should be easier to get the proper preparation for a trip. And then we're going to go on with the tools that can help you in planning a trip for somebody with the limitations, and invite you to our big summit in 2014, where you will be able to learn more about what is being done around the world. So Kerol is a nonprofit organization that was founded in 1979, and it was André Leclerc that founded it, and he is still the director of the organization. The idea came about because he was a person with a cerebral paralysis, and he wanted to just go to a different city to visit his girlfriend, and found out that it was very difficult to get information about accessibility and to have access to service, but on top of it, to be able to have a good service. People back then were very worried to see somebody with a disability trying to take the bus by himself, and they just wanted to, they ended up calling the police just to see if he was just not running away from a mental home or something like that. So he decided with some of his friends to start this organization to make tourism and culture accessible to people with restricted physical abilities. In the beginning, the idea was just to have a little booklet and have a list of the places that would be accessible in the province of Quebec. And then it grew into a bigger organization that is now recognized by the Ministry of Tourism here as the only company that can evaluate and give accessibility information about anything related to tourism in the province. So Kerol is not a travel agency, and is more of a access advocate and we give information on accessibility. Mainly, our expertise is in the province of Quebec, but we do have partnership with different countries around the world, and we do provide information on accessibility as long as we can verify that they say they are accessible and they are, then we will put that information into our website. So we do the evaluation and certification here. We train. That is one of our main objectives, is to make sure that people not only have access to buildings, but also have good service once they get there, so that they don't feel like they are seen as either as a burden or as a big task, since most of the times all we need is just a little help, less than what most people think. We do the promotion of accessible tourism through our different promotional tools that I'll be talking about later on. And we do conduct market studies that help us define and demonstrate that people with disabilities do travel, and just find out how they can, how easy it can be to adapt to the special needs. It's an unsuspected large niche market. Most people think that people with disabilities are just a few. Ted mentioned before the 20% of people in the population needing some adaptation or living with some limitations. The two market studies that we did, the two latest ones, the one in 2009 was done here in the province, and the one in 2011 was done through the other provinces around Quebec. And the main purposes were to analyze the behaviors and attitudes of people with limited physical abilities so that we can better understand why they travel, how they travel, what helps and what limits their travels. Then shed light on the evolution of conditions, see if it's, evaluate the actual and potential economic impact. It can become quickly very lucrative and serve as a guide to help better meet the travel needs. So with these studies, we have now tools to convince people that this is a market worth opening to. So out of these two studies, we found that many people with physical limited abilities travel several times a year. When they travel, it's for several days. And contrary to most people, they plan far in advance because they need to know that it's going to be accessible. They know they will have more questions, and they will need to plan more in advance. And they usually involve more people. In this population today, most people tend to travel as individuals or not care if they go alone, and whether it be in business or in personal travel. People with disabilities most often travel either at least with family or friends, and sometimes even with caregivers. So that would mean that when they travel, there will be 2, 3, or 4 in the party. So that means more revenue for the persons, for the travel agent, and for the destination and hotels and things like that. They represent a lucrative market that travel when they are informed. They are faithful and will return to the venue that treated them well. And I think that's a very important point for travel agents, and because today people will call, they will ask you many questions about a travel they want to do, and then they will start shopping around, either see what another travel agent will say, or go on a website, and they will go for the lowest price. People with disabilities in general, if you can answer the questions and if you give them, if they have a nice trip, they will go back to the travel agent because they know that they need to trust the person that is preparing the travel for them. It is a clientele that is largely unknown. It's very the other point is that to find information, people with restricted mobility, they will rely on their own experience, but contrary again to most people is they will go to travel agencies. So that's another point to keep in mind, because they know that a travel agent that is willing to serve them will have the right resources and will take the time, will know what tools to use to be able to find the right information as Ted mentioned before, there are many websites out there that are done by people that do not do only talk about their own experience and do not take into consideration that what is accessible to them might not be to somebody else. As we explain the difference in sizes of wheelchairs and in being maybe if you go and you're in the manual wheelchair but you can stand up for 2 steps, you won't see the inaccessibility that somebody in a motorized wheelchair will be faced with. I'm just giving you an example of something that came out of this study. The estimated population is based on how many people said they would be able to travel, and the ones that traveled, how much money they spent. So if you look at the amounts on the screen right now, you see that if you don't tend to to people with disabilities, you're missing out on big revenues. Tirul offers training, and as I said, this is a big thing for us. The training has been ongoing for about 20 years. It was updated last about 5 years. We're going through an update again this year just to be sure that we're up to date and that the information that we give is current. It is a 3.5-hour sensitivity training. We wish we could do it longer because there's always more to say, but I think in that 3.5 hours, we at least get the information across. What we have done through the years now is that we have adapted it to the different tourism businesses. And this training for us, it is very important also, is given by persons with disabilities. So people that really live and understand what it means, what are the needs, and that can give real anecdotes of things that happen to them. So it's not just a theory to try to throw at somebody, but it's also filled with experience and with anecdotes that will help you understand what would be the issues when we travel and we have disabilities. And we always have one person with a mobility impairment and one person with visual impairment. We have a travel agent specific training. So our regular course is 3.5 hours, but our travel agent specific training is a day and a half. And that being that in the first half day, we do the basic course where we show statistics, vocabulary to use, defining disabilities, and we include all types of disabilities from hearing impairment, visual impairment, mobility impairment, and then we also talk about speech impairment, and we do quickly go through all the what is the right attitude to have when somebody with a disability shows up at your business and wants to get a service. The second part of the training is very specific to travel agents on how to plan a trip for travelers with disabilities. We did split it in two specific areas. One is for a successful travel. So how do you analyze client needs, find the right service provider, and then set up an itinerary for that person, and how do you ensure the right follow-up? How do you make sure that when that person wants to, when that person gets to travel, they really do get what you have set up on the itinerary? Sometimes just calling 48 hours before the person is doing the trip and confirming with the hotel that the room reserved is still the right room and that the airline knows that the person that's going to travel needs help transferring into the seat or needs help being guided around the airport and things like that is the best thing to do, because sometimes from one person to the other it sort of gets lost. So just make sure that you do the follow-up. That's a big, big thing. And then once we've gone through that, we also ensure that you understand the marketing planning that it needs. So first of all, to evaluate, once we've done everything that we've done through that training, do you still want to serve this market, and how do you market to that clientele? But also see what is the accessibility of the service that you offer now, and what do you need to improve it. And finally, just to make sure that we make it as concrete as possible, on the second half, the last half day, we make sure that we have representatives of the travel business that come and talk about the reality of what they offer. So we'll have somebody from an airline, airport, the cruise ship, the intercity bus, and the train come and talk about how it works when you want to make a reservation with them for somebody with a disability. Most of them have their own little questionnaires to fill out to see what types of needs these people might have, and usually they'll ask about the equipment they will be carrying and things like that. And that is also where we will confirm if there are any restrictions to people with disabilities traveling on their services. Now that we are going on to traveling tools, Kéroule has a database. It's available on the web. It's both in French and in English. We will be, of course, putting on that database everything that we have evaluated in the tourism industry for the province of Quebec. I have put the little logos there. You see the usual one with the wheelchair. That's the one that says it's fully accessible. What you will find on our website is also the little wheelchair with somebody standing behind. That means partially accessible, and that's very important. Instead of saying you can't, you're either fully accessible or we don't want to hear from you, we put the partially accessible logo where there will be a little bit of an issue. It might just be that everything is accessible, but there are no grab bars in the bathroom, or the museum is on 2 floors. It's an old building, there's no elevators, so you can do the first floor but not the second floor. But at least the person knows before they get there, and they can decide to use it to go to that museum or not to go, but at least they have the information. And then we also put the information when there are services for people with visual or hearing impairment. What you will also find on that website, as I said before, is any information that we would have about the international travel. Ted mentioned before the problem with many websites being done by individuals. I know that I have traveled to Cancun, Riviera Maya twice in the past year, and now there is an accessible transportation and equipment rental company that does a really good job, very personalized and very well adapted. So that's something that an example of what you would also find on our website. We also put any information about the studies that we've done in the past and things like that. Another interesting traveling tools, and we hope will be an example, and more destinations will decide to do like that, is the tool we call the Accessible Road. It is available on the web, where you will find more information. You will get videos of different venues that want to show their accessibilities. You can look through that website and say, I want to do more of a cultural visiting of Quebec. I want to do more of a family touring of Quebec. And the important thing for the accessible road is that anybody that wants, any business that wants to be part of the accessible road has to be fully accessible according to our criteria, but also has to have their frontline staff trained. So the person that goes through these venues knows that they will get good service. And right now we have 14 of the regions that are involved, and there is also a printed version that you can get. It is available also in French and in English, and we upgrade it every year with new businesses that see that there is a market and want to show that they have accessibility and want to be part of the accessible road. The other tool I wanted to show you is the accesstotravel.gc. It is a government website, and this tells you more about accessibility in general in Canada, but it also has tools on how to prepare or a checklist on how to make sure that you think of everything when you plan it for somebody with disability. So that would be very useful for you travel agents to use later on, because you can print these checklists and reuse them whenever you have somebody with a disability comes to your office and wants to travel. Finally, I mentioned at the very beginning that we have a World Summit coming up in Montreal in 2014. The World Summit is, again, in line with what Ted was saying before. When we go around the world and we want to travel and we have a disability, there's always long research to do. There's not one standard of what it means to have an accessible room in a hotel or to have an accessible transport. So there's always many phone calls, many websites to go through, many confirmations to do. Luckily today we have cameras that can take photos and can be sent by email, and we get more information that way. And we have something like Google Map that can show us if there are actual steps in the front. Be accessible in tourism and culture and transportation. So by attending such a summit, you would find out more about what good accessibility is, because we will invite destinations that are doing good things to share with us how they do it, and then hopefully develop a universal standard. And I think that's it for me.
Oh, great. Thank you, Isabel. What a great presentation. Let's understand the untapped potential market of accessible tourism. I think for me, the biggest takeaway, a day and a half, that's a great program. And the conference you guys are organizing, that sounds wonderful. Now, is that conference open to travel agents? I'm assuming it is, Isabel?
It is.
Okay, perfect. So, yeah, Isabel's information was up there. So there's my slide. Thank you. Questions and answers. So yeah, with that, it is time to open the floor for questions. I know we had some. I'm going to go back to Janet, one of her first questions. Oh, good for you. You've launched, that's awesome. You have an Expand Your World travel company, a tour company. So for people with extra support or medical conditions. Now, maybe Ted, you can touch base on this. She's wondering the challenges marketing, as many people do not see themselves as being part of this accessibility community. So do you have any suggestions that might be less obvious than seniors residents, like how to reach that market? Maybe I'll ask both of you, Ted and Isabel, but we'll start with you, Ted, if you have any thoughts on that.
Sure. Well, as you noticed in my presentation, I did try to broaden it, because I think if we do wish to make I'll come to the other side. If we want destinations to become accessible, we have to explain that it's not just people in wheelchairs who have these issues, that people with a broad range, even just people trying to take 2 or 3 kids, are part of that market, because they really have concerns regarding steps, slopes, a whole range of things. The marketing issue is that most of them do not see themselves as disabled. So it's almost having to go and maybe call it easy tourism or something like that for people who don't wish to bungee jump off a cliff, but they want an easy walk up to the viewpoint, or they want to be able to make sure they don't have to climb 20 stairs to get to their view room. So what we're doing is packaging travel for those people who are not terribly physically fit. And that, I think, is very much part of the same market, who want to walk up a ramp because they got a sore hip, or they're very hefty and therefore don't want a lot of stairs. I think it is a marketing challenge because I may have defined disability too narrowly in the past, and maybe we've got to almost seek a new word.
Yeah, and I noticed, I think at the bottom there, Janet just typed that she calls their host comfort care host. And so like if you got that, I know Ted, you mentioned that LinkedIn group, which I believe somebody wrote up there. It's the LinkedIn group is Accessible Travel for People with Disabilities.
That's
Thank
great.
you, Laurel, for that. But Isabel, do you know if
well, I know that usually when I do give the travel agent training, I usually tell them go through your community, depending on whether if it's a local enterprise or but they're going into the community website, or finding out what organizations are in the area that you are covering. Any organization of people with disabilities, or any organization that would be, that would comprise more than one type of disability. Let's say you can go specific, like see if there are any paraplegic association, or any multiple sclerosis organization, and different things like that, or any organization that would be active, like if there are a sports organization for people with disabilities or anything. And I just going through, let's say, local newspapers, because I often say sometimes I hear about things that can be good for me from a neighbor or an uncle that read something in the local newspaper, not necessarily in the magazine designated for people with disabilities. Sometimes we forget that it's not because people have limitations that they only read things in magazines that are specific to people with limitations. And as it was said before, many people do not want to be seen as people with disabilities, so they will not even be part of an organization of their own type of disability. So if you want to be broader, then yes, you start with the organizations of people with disabilities, but don't forget to talk to people that don't have the disability or not specific to people with disabilities.
Oh, great. And Gail Henry at Barbados has an ongoing program to encourage facilities for the differently able. It's fairly easy to get to many beaches. I haven't been to Barbados, but I have to go and check it out. But that sounds great, Gail. Thank you for adding that and sharing that information. And Sharon was wondering about some access-friendly destinations. Ted, you had mentioned some, but maybe if you have one or two other top of your head, other than Quebec. We know how to use Quebec.
Well, yeah, I mean, we do have our own accessible road that we're really proud of.
Yeah.
But other than that, I mean, depending on how far people want to go, if it's their first travel and stuff like that, for sure, all cruises are usually what people say is the easiest because you have all your accessibility on cruise. Other than that, I know that Vegas is amazing for accessibility. I can use any I can go there and not worry about if my caregiver wants to go along with me when I want to go do something. I have access to the bus system, I can go everywhere. I've just been to Barcelona this summer, and I was impressed with the fact that I could just take the bus like everybody else, use the subway. Like 80% of the subway, I think, was accessible to me, and even on the beach, I got to. There was an area where they had the beach wheelchair, but also, it's one thing to have the beach wheelchair, but they even had staff on use the wheelchair, and maybe it wasn't as easy to transfer into, and then they would push that person all the way into the water. And they even had the lift with the hammock to help you get in and out of the wheelchair if you couldn't transfer yourself. And they had even the canes, the plastic canes that could help you if you were.
Oh, that sounds amazing for
And
sure.
as,
Yeah, I'd
as
like
I
just
mentioned, just the Cancun having the accessible transport was really good. And even Beijing has they don't have the accessible transport anymore. They used to for the Olympics, and then they took it out. But at least they do have, there is a tour company that can take you from and visit around China.
Good. And Ted, do you want to jump in there?
Yeah, I'd like to add, I definitely support Isabel in your comment on cruise ships. And many of them have up to 20 or 30 disabled rooms, which are reasonably suitable for almost all uses. And for people who have smaller wheelchairs or just may use walkers and things, a normal room will probably do for them. But again, they have to assess it themselves. Some cruise ships actually have the lifts that allow people to go into the swimming pools on the ships. Several of the newer ones do. Second comment is the United States is probably the most accessible country generally because of the Veterans with Disabilities Act, so that it is normal to find good accessible rooms in almost every hotel. And others have a long way to go to catch up.
Great point. And I think Laurel is pointing out, she's talking about Open Doors organization in Chicago. It looks great. I myself, it's opendoornfp.org, and they seem to have access guides as well, perhaps similar to Quebec. So that's another great resource. Thank you for sharing that, Laurel. I believe we had a question, Isabel, about this agent training. Where do they get further information? I'm assuming they can contact you. And would they have to go to Montreal for that training, or is that on site?
Yeah, right.
Before we wrap up,
We have a class coming, just for your information, we do have a class coming up in December. I believe it's the 11th and 12th.
Oh, good. Okay, that's good to know. So we can contact you and sign up. It is, I think that's almost our last comment there. We've had some recommendations on there for cruise ship, if anyone wants to read the chats there. And yeah, I think we've answered all the questions. You can type in the last one. I'm just going to do my quick wrap up. But it is now 2:03, so it's time to say thank you to, first of all, our series sponsors, who were, of course, Air Canada, Eaton Chelsea, Ted Rogers School of Management at Ryerson, and, of course, Baxter Travel Media. And thank you to our speakers, and for staying a bit late. I appreciate it, Dr. Ted Manning and Isabel Descharmes. You guys have so much experience, and thank you for encouraging our participants to embrace this market. And to our participants, our RTTF participants, thank you for a wonderful 2013 webinar series. I wish you all the best as you continue on your sustainable tourism journey. And finally, don't forget to send in your leadership nominations by December 6th. Anyone can nominate a company or person, and it's free. So watch the RTTF website probably near early February, I guess, for the announcements of our winners. I believe that is it. I'm just checking the chat box here. Yep, that would be it. So that's it for 2013, and I want to say thank you very much, everyone.
Thank you.
Bye.